Now for a review of what's making the headlines in the papers this morning, let's bring in Arise analyst Dr. Constance Ikwoku. Over to you, Dr. Constance.
Good morning, Yolanda.
Good morning. It's good to see you.
Good morning, Dr. Constance.
Good morning. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Another day, another
In
paper
high
review.
Anticipation.
That's right.
Anticipation, okay.
Yeah.
Yes, there's quite a number of stories for everyone today. Hello there and welcome to the program. We'll begin with this day newspaper. Leading themes in today's front pages include IMF revising Nigeria's growth forecast higher for 2026, trials and government legal actions in relation to Showore, fuel tanker accidents and protests over unpaid contracts and pensions, as well as political stories. This morning, this day leads with the International Monetary Fund upgrading Nigeria's 2026 growth outlook to 4.4%. and 4.1% for 2027, as it declared that the macroeconomic reforms are delivering results. On security, Minister of Defense General Christopher Musa states once again that peace deals with terrorists is ineffective because such groups do not respect agreements. And in Davos, Switzerland, at the World Economic Forum, Vice President Kashim Shettima speaks of Nigeria's determination to contribute to global economic discourse as he opens Nigeria House at the event. Daily Sun has gone with the demonstration that rocked the Federal Capital Territory yesterday, with protesters locking the minister outside for unpaid debt of 4 trillion naira, pensions and intimidation allegations, among others. Minister Wike has defended himself, noting that 10 out of 14 demands have been met. Daily Independent reports that the DSS has rearrested Abubakar Malami after his release from Kuje prison, while contractors accuse the government of using their funds for re-election. And Nigeria's non-oil export hits an all-time high of $6.1 billion in 2025. Leadership newspaper leads with Kano Governor Abba Yusuf potentially joining the ruling All Progressives Congress today or tomorrow after his meeting with President Tinubu yesterday. Apparently, the rough edges have been smoothened out. Still on politics, Obasanjo in closed-door meeting with IBB over 2027. New Telegraph turns attention to insecurity, writing that more than 160 people were kidnapped in twin church attacks in Kaduna State. The government, the police, BDP, and Christian Association of Nigeria have been trading words over this incident. The Kaduna State government says the report of abduction is not true. The Nigerian Army refutes news of mutiny in the force, and federal government opens 2026 overseas scholarship for postgraduate studies. Vanguard has gone with a report debunking that New York Times story that linked an Onitsha-based man's research with President Trump ordering an airstrike on Nigeria. The headline reads, "Massacre of Christians in Nigeria, what we told the New York Times bureau chief McLean into society." We'll have more discussion on that later. The Punch writes about indignation over plans by Katsina State to release 70 bandits, deepening suspicion of the role played by state governments in sustaining the lifeline of bandits and terrorists. Moving on to the international headlines, the Citizen newspaper of South Africa leads with the rot in the African National Congress, with analysts concluding that even with his billions, Patrice Motsepe and President Cyril Ramaphosa, who, by the way, are in-laws, can neither lure party members back nor save the ANC. The Guardian newspaper, here we have several front pages in the UK, highlighting tensions between the UK and the US after Donald Trump revived talk of US acquiring Greenland. He has linked his grievances over being overlooked for a Nobel Peace Prize. Denmark and Greenland leaders have rejected any sale, prompting unease among European allies. As we can see in The Guardian, Trump is unhappy about the Peace Prize snub. In Financial Times, trade tariff or trade strife with Europe rise due to the same matter. And in The Times, Trump says he no longer purely thinks about peace owing to that prize snub. Metro.co.uk leads with protests about that land grab, with demonstrators insisting Greenland is not for sale. A price idiot, says this headline. Daily Telegraph and Daily Mail considers new restrictions on social media access for under-16s. This is UK government, including possible bans or age verification measures aimed at protecting young people's mental health. Newspaper spotlights US and UK relations, which is said to be at its lowest ebb since the 1956 Suez Crisis. The Daily Express focuses on nurses uniting against perceived NHS policy failures, especially related to compliance with court rulings on biological sex and workplace safeguards. The Sun fronts Brooklyn Beckham, who says he's done with his family, and blaming his mom, Posh Spice, for ruining his wedding. Now let's see what the stories mean for everyday citizens. Returning to This Day newspaper. In This Day, Minister of Defense General Christopher Musa says that peace deal with terrorists is completely counterproductive because such groups do not respect agreements. Benga Minister Musa is hammering on this because past records indicate that terrorists only exploit negotiations to regroup, rearm, and resume violence without abandoning their ideology. Hence this position by the minister.
Yeah, the minister is a core soldier who has just been newly appointed by the federal government as from being the chief of defense staff. I think he had a month interregnum, and he was transited by his appointment to as Minister of Defense. So, being a core soldier, a thoroughbred military personnel, the word dialoguing, negotiating, they're not military terms, so it's not surprising that he would not buy such. But if you look at the whole thing, it makes a lot of sense because these, we've said it here a couple of times, for the opt-in time, these are people who have an extremely radical ideology, and negotiating with them will just mean inadvertently strengthening them, recouping them to pose a bigger threat to the society at large, and that will be a setback to Nigeria's military operations against terrorists or banditry, whichever way you call it. So I think it should be discouraged. But sometimes what happens when your loved ones are brought in harm's way and are held hostage by hostile forces in the wild, what do you do? So I think it also speaks to the capacity of our military to pursue this issue to the end, to have a comprehensive approach in tackling security. And I would want to resonate the call once again for state policing is the way to go. Right.
It's safe to say that Minister Musa has maintained this tempo. This is not the first time he's talking about it. He has maintained this tempo because of what is happening in the states. State governments arranging peace deals with terrorists and bandits. And the state and the federal government cannot be working at cross purposes, with one paying, bandits and the other one saying we should not be paying. So that is what he is hammering on. We saw that story of Katsina state government preparing to release 70 bandits as part of a peace deal, a move that many have described as reckless and dangerous to national security. The government there claims that the planned release is part of efforts to consolidate peace with these bandits and get the freedom of abducted persons. This is not the first time it's doing it. It's had similar deals in the past which helped to release abducted citizens. But people are furious about this, and some have gone as far as asking the federal government to intervene to halt that release of these bandits. So we know that Katsina State is seriously dealing with an upsurge of banditry and terrorism, but banditry specifically, and all over the communities, harassing people, abducting people. And so we have 1,500 civilians abducted not even abducted, killed between 2021 and 2025. So the state government, as we can see, is desperate, looking at measures it thinks would help it in handling this particular situation. But at the end of the day, it doesn't help. While in the temporary or in the interim, they might be able to release some abducted citizens, they go back again and regroup. And that is why the Minister of Defense is saying we cannot continue this. So he's indirectly or directly speaking to state government and saying we have to stop this, we have to halt this. It cannot be business as usual. Indeed. So we're going to see whether they're able to adhere to what the minister is saying. But to your point also, the federal government, who is responsible for policing, handles police at the federal and state level, should be able to provide the security for people. Indeed. And the state government to ensure that citizens are safe. Staying with this day newspaper, the Davos Forum 2026 returns to the Swiss Alps to address world's most pressing global challenges. This year's theme is a spirit of dialogue, which sort of echoes what is needed in a very turbulent world today, talking about conflicts in Ukraine, the Venezuela conundrum, contests over Greenland, amongst other pressing global matters. Nigeria has a strong showing in Davos, and VP Kashim Shettima commissioned the first ever Nigerian pavilion there with a declaration that Nigeria is ready to take a frontline seat with the world in conversations, and says that we are no longer going to be observers but participants. Right. Many African countries do this yearly pilgrimage, if I may use that word, and perhaps it's time to evaluate whether repeated appearances translate into real gains for economics, or is just merely symbolic presence, Yolanda?
Rightly said, Dr. Constance. I think it's about time that we start seeing these type of changes. I think we all know, if we remember, that Nigeria has come under fire in the past for not having presence at its overseas pavilions. We saw this in Japan last year, and everybody made a complete sham of the fact that our pavilion had nothing present there. There was no presence of any sort. So I think this is a very good move to see this happening in Davos, such a world stage, Switzerland. And we've also been having numerous conversations about investors coming into Nigeria. So this is a wonderful step forward into attracting that. President Bola Tinubu just came from Abu Dhabi, where he was saying the same thing. So seeing Vice President Shettima echoing these, these sorts of things about bringing more people, bringing business into the country, bringing investors, bringing the type of dialogue and the type of conversations that tells the world to say, listen, we are having problems in Nigeria, but Nigeria is definitely open for business. We are open to negotiations and to dialogue that would bring the type of change that the economy needs in terms of, partnerships and businesses having their investment foot in Nigeria.
Definitely. I mean, the Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment, Dr. Jumoko Oduwole, did say that that pavilion is a place where there will be, or Nigeria will be showcasing several sectors: solid minerals, yes, digital and creative sectors, and climate sustainability, agriculture. And so the key then will be translating this dialogue that they're having with different countries into real capital flows to the country, and also strengthening investor confidence. We have that IMF report that is saying that the macroeconomic indications are that it's delivering results, and there's going to be higher growth this year, 4.4% and 4.1% for next year. But remember, the global context is that there's a tighter capital flows within the world, with a lot of countries fighting for investment. It is no longer as it used to be a couple of years ago. So there is competition. Indeed. The bottom line then will be for Nigeria, in terms of your country, when you're inviting people to your country, people are looking at the stability of your country, people are looking at predictable laws, they're looking at the macroeconomic environment, they're looking at respect for contracts and property rights and transparent regulation and all of that. That put together is what investors are looking at. It's not just what you are saying or selling to them, because investment is a risk and several factors determine where the money or the capital flows to.
Indeed. Just to add to it, that I think the major page turner in this conversation is that we are moving from that pilgrimage approach to global issues, economic issues, to real-time approach, because that pavilion would function if all actions are geared in a coherent expectation. It will be geared to real-time and more strategic approach to many of these issues that we've outlined so far.
Yeah. All right. Let's go to Leadership newspaper. Governor Abba Yusuf of Kano State potentially joining the ruling All Progressives Congress today or tomorrow, according to this report. Benga, this defection hands the APC a big win and alters the political equation in the Northwest, doesn't it?
Indeed, Kano presents a very interesting perspective when it comes to the political landscape of the North, and indeed Nigeria, because many people would arguably say that Kano is the political capital of the North, and when it comes to the political culture of Kano State, it is deeply religious because of its fanatical devotion and virulent followership when it comes to politics. Kwankwasi has been able to mold that cult followership in Kano State, and now what is happening now would be a major shift or crack depending on how the power brokers in Kano State handles it. Whichever way you look at it, there is the Ganduje faction in APC already that had an estranged relationship with its former godfather, the Kwankwasi movement, being led by former governor Rabiu Musa Kwankwaso. So when, if with all writings on the wall, which is indicating a likely defection coming from Governor Abba Yusuf of Kano State, then there would be a shift, a major shift of equation in the political landscape. Definitely,
and there are also cracks beginning to appear within Kano State because the deputy governor has said he is not moving with the governor.
Indeed.
He is going to stay with Musa Rabiu Kwankwaso, who is the benefactor of the current governor. So the way that this particular Abba Yusuf governor handles the entire episode would determine his political future, and it's very important for him. This is either going to catapult him to the top or completely bury him, depending on how he handles it. So we'll be watching and bringing you more on that front. But again, realignments happening, negotiations happening behind closed doors. That is why he went to the president, because the indication is that he wants an automatic ticket in APC for the next election.
We don't forget that underlying these issues are the Emirates crisis.
Right.
We still have two Kano emirs that are very powerful in the political scheme of things. So that would also create a bit of more uncertainty depending on how it pans out.
All right, Yolanda, let me come to you on the next story. Vanguard newspaper, please. Massacre of Christians in Nigeria, what we told the New York Times bureau chief McLean into society. The recent New York Times article suggesting that the U.S. strikes in Nigeria were influenced by intelligence from a small-scale Onitsha trader has been widely criticized as misleading and factually weak. The International Society for Civil Liberties and Rule of Law, otherwise known as Inter-Society, says New York Times lied against his chairman, Emeka Umagbalasi, who is a screwdriver and wrenches salesman, as well as a criminologist. He has a postgraduate degree in criminology and security studies and peace studies, as well as conflict resolution. He called the New York Times story a perfidy of lies concocted by the paper's West African bureau chief Ruth McLean, who interviewed him in December 2025. To the contrary, they said their human rights report and data collection precedes President Donald Trump has nothing to do with him. New York Times had sought to link their work to Trump's decision to direct airstrike in Sokoto State. Inter-Society is holding New York Times feet to the fire. And we also know that story, well, some say it's a hatchet job, especially against an ethnic group in Nigeria, potentially deepening or polarizing the country. So this probably can also be located within the context of the elections next year, 2027. Some forces trying to pit the Igbos against the North, all in order to get the votes in 2027. How are you interpreting this saga?
I'm glad that you made that point, Dr. Constance, because that was the most standout thing for me when I saw that report. I said, hang on a moment, why are these two being pitted against each other? And I think that was obvious for many people that this is just, seeming like somewhat of a PR stunt here. And, some of the things that were said in this report that really, just hit home was the fact that they said he had made inflammatory remarks about the Fulani ethnic group, calling them animals and suggesting they should be confined to a single state. I mean, that's such a
Which was
horrible,
not true.
Absolutely, and that's such a horrible thing to say and to put out there. What kind of reaction are you expecting from the citizens? Are you not going to expect them to fight against each other and have qualms that were not previously there before? You know, this initially started about religion and is slowly becoming about tribe and ethnicity, which is such a shame. Now, I have a few reactions here that I'd like to point out that I quite like that I read. And one is from Bishop Matthew Hassan Kuka, who argued that focusing too much on Christian casualty data obscures the more important issue of a weak Nigerian state that fails to protect its people. And I think that is where the focus should be. The fact that we have high rising cases of banditry, kidnapping, terrorism in the nation, that is what our focus should be. People should be at a unified front to fight against the bigger enemy and not each other.
And when you look at the story again, it sort of exposes how flawed,
absolutely,
even a newspaper,
yes,
top newspaper like New York Times can be. I mean, it just exposes the lapse in editorial judgment,
absolutely,
to allow this kind of story to fly, to be published, knowing that the whole world is reading it and is watching it, and people linking it to that effort to lobby in Washington, D.C. to get Nigeria's voice heard, but doing it in a very terrible way. And the story also oversimplifies the security issues in Nigeria.
Yes.
Nigeria or the United States is not going to rely on Emeka Umar Gwelasi. And the issue concerning whether it's Christian genocide allegations, right, predates President Trump. It's been here for a very long time. We have Nigerians that live in Washington, D.C. that have been making a case at the National Assembly there, at the Parliament there, that they need the United States to intervene to save their kith and kin in northern Nigeria. This is not a new issue at all. It's been there for a very long time. And so what we are seeing here is a story that, honestly, inadequate fact-checking and maybe just, you know, a pure hatchet job, as some say, that is being done here. Let's move to the international headlines. Greenland once again. The U.S. President Donald Trump insists on slapping EU countries with tariff, and NATO countries rallying around one another. Trump's threat to U.S. allies in Europe on this matter is without parallel, Benga.
Yeah, I think Trump's patterns is very clear in the international arena. He's been someone who has tried to match action with his words, so his threat cannot be taken lightly. But when we look at the overlapping and the entire outlook from the global perspective, it might be a global flashpoint for a potential outbreak of global tension. Let me leave it in that conservative way, because if Donald Trump is insisting that this region, the Arctic island, has a strong security implication, and that gives him the right to secure ownership of that island, which some of these European allies have frowned at. And this also contravenes the international law, the Article 1 of Section 2 of the United Nations Charter, which guarantees the right for self-determination, right, and for people to determine their political status and their political future. So when you look at this, it's a very strategic area. And I think that if this is not well managed with astute political solution, right, that might escalate further, and the whole world might be on a very high risk threshold.
Indeed, Yolanda, you had something to say.
Yes, I did. I wanted to say this case it's a classic case of dynamite coming in small packages, because Greenland is really standing its ground despite such a small population, and it's saying we will not relent. Now, Greenland has also stated that there is no immediate threat from Russia or China, as is being claimed by the Americans. Now, Trump is also ruffling feathers, just as you rightly mentioned, and is now punishing other European countries that choose to stand with Greenland, which shouldn't be the case. Earlier on, we took a report, I believe Dr. Constance is the one who read it, about the Nobel Peace Prize, you know, with Trump, you know, kind of sulking that he was not getting his way. He didn't get the Nobel Peace Prize that he so rightfully deserved. And so because of that, he is choosing to punish other countries and to declare war, so to speak, on Greenlanders. So can the US stand alone if they push all their allies away? This is a key question to ask at this point in time.
Yeah, I would ask the other question, can the Europeans match US military power? Who will be watching? All right, those were your headlines for today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Constance.